Good morning. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. It is a beautiful Tuesday here in Asheville, North Carolina. My name is Devin, and I'm here to talk to you about something that I think is very important. The real question here is, how do I identify in this society? And I don't mean that necessarily as in I as in myself, but I mean a question to be asked by ourselves. How do I place myself within this society? And how do I place myself within my own life? In our society, we have somewhat of an identity disorder where we don't really recognize who we are and what our full potential is. We become bogged down by the menialness of our society and the things that we think we have to do, the actions that we think we have to take, and the way that we feel we have to participate within our own society. And this is a very important issue because in doing so, and in participating in society the way that we believe, or that we're led to believe that we are supposed to, we actually remove major parts of ourselves. And we no longer are able to identify with the true nature of who we are as human beings. So, the purpose of this video is to create something that is practical. Because I don't think most, if not any of us, are willing to run off into the mountains of Tibet, spend the rest of our times wearing robes and meditating. This may be ideal to some people, but to most it just doesn't seem practical, and that's okay. That is okay. Because reality is that spirit is allowed to unfold in any way, shape, direction, or form that it wants to or it needs to. And in fact, we are meant to be multifaceted. We aren't meant to fall into the same mold, as much as we may be led to believe that we're supposed to. On multiple levels, it can be seen that there is a layer of energy that exists around all of us. A lot of spiritualists believe this, religious people believe this, and even science is shown to prove that all molecules are constantly in motion. This motion generates energy, and this is what we are created from. This is why we're able to observe and interact with the world in the way that we are, although we may think that something is solid. Even those particles are constantly in motion. And we've created devices like computers and televisions and cell phones that are able to pick up on this information, decode it, and generate a world around us and within these devices that seem like the reality. It's very convincing. And this is an illusion to our senses. Even as you're sitting and watching this video now, you're hearing my voice. This is an illusory code that has been created and generated that allows you to pick up on this information and perceive what is happening. And we ourselves, as humans, operate in a similar fashion. Our five senses pick up on this external stimulus energy. It's decoded by our minds, processed by our ego, and then a perceptive reality is generated all around us. And naturally, this information is neutral. There is no good or bad energy that is created in front of us. From these perceptions that we pick up on, we react to our environment, and depending on how we're conditioned and what our belief system may be, we process this information. And so again, it's energy is picked up by our five senses. This information is decoded by the brain. The ego processes this information, which creates our perception to what the situation is, and then we react to this stimulus, good or bad. So, when we break these parts down, we've talked about energy a little bit. The five senses are also pretty simplistic. They're what we see, smell, touch, what we perceive on a regular basis. The mind's simplified purpose, and again, this is a simplified purpose, is as an observer. The mind's primary purpose is to interact with simple logical processes. And the mind is not necessarily meant to be a creator. It's meant to process this information. There are very simplistic things that the mind is meant. I mean, it's kind of like a 1980s 8 gigahertz computer. You know, it's not meant to be the absolute processor of what our reality is. All of these things come together to create this. So when our minds get bogged down and troubled by this process of trying to create our perceptive reality, we get stuck into a rut. We begin thinking that we, at every level, are meant to be the creators and objectors of our reality. But actually, we have a higher sense of mind that is meant to create this reality. We aren't meant to take our past experiences to create our future ones, or even our present situation. And we're not supposed to take what we think is meant to be our futures and try to generate that out of what is happening right now and what has happened in our past. And in fact, we limit ourselves by doing that because we're not allowing our lives and the universe to unfold in front of us the way that it's meant to. We're meant to be here to enjoy this experience, and by trying to create or generate this experience, we are not allowing it to express itself the way that it's meant to, and this is where our anxieties and our fears come from. So now the ego, again, simplified purpose, the ego is meant to determine if something is a threat or not. The ego is meant as a protector, and this served us very well a long, long time ago. Now the ego kind of takes a different direction in what it does, because the process of the ego has been simplified dramatically, but the presence of the ego is never diminished. So when information is passed from the five senses to the mind, and this decoded information is handed to the ego passes a judgment on whether this is going to be harmful or beneficial. And this creates a judgment. A good example of this would be of how the ego works in, again, practical, simplified sense in today's world is if a stranger approaches you and tries to say hello to you, that inner dialogue will typically switch over to who is this person, why are they talking to me, and what do they want from me? That is the ego in action, because the ego is trying to assess whether this is going to be something that's going to be harmful to me or helpful to me, and the fight or flight mode begins to click almost instantly. And if the ego determines that something is a threat, even to the operating system, it will do everything in its power to remove itself from whatever the situation may be as quickly as possible. So what is an operating system? Because obviously the world is no longer fraught with saber-toothed tigers and bears running wild and mammoths, everything. So the biggest threat to the ego is to the operating system. So what is an operating system? Well, Terence McKenna defines the operating system as culture. Our cultural operating system is again simplified at a baseline, our base beliefs system and structure. So in the United States, base operating system would be, again, simplified, and this does not apply to everybody, but Christianity, politics, and the bipartisan system that we have here in the United States, hamburgers, football, et cetera, et cetera. That's baseline operating system, and these vary in different regions around the world. So if the ego perceives that something that this person is saying is a threat, then it's going to immediately retract itself from the situation and try to remove the individual from the situation as quickly as possible. So this creates denial within ourselves. And denial is defined as the failure to acknowledge an unacceptable truth or emotion or to admit it into consciousness. And it's used as a defense mechanism. And a lot of times when the denial structure kicks in, there is no listening to a potential argument. There is no objective truth besides what has already been implemented within the operating system. Regardless of whether it's something that could be more positive or used better, it doesn't matter. When denial kicks in, the ego rears up. It is going to remove itself from the potential of anything within the system being damaged in any way, which is an issue. And I think it's pretty obvious as to why this is an issue. Because it prevents us from being able to draw new understandings from what is happening around us. It locks us into our perception. It locks us into the belief system with no way to ever divagate from what that is. And so the ability to experience new things is severely hindered by this, which is not a good thing. It's not. Because life is about new experiences. And through this denial structure, our perception will begin to become warped. And this will concrete this illusory reality even more. Because what I'm saying about the fact that reality is an illusion, this means that reality is an opportunity for new experience. Reality is an opportunity for new things. And by allowing ourselves to recognize that this information is processed through our minds, through our ego, but it's missing something. And we'll get to that in a bit. So, when you add into the equation the illusion of wages, taxes, retirement, mortgages, again, United States ideology, but and not even limited to just the United States, but I'm referring specifically to the American dream here. The diminishment of the arts to be replaced with arbitrary gains on a money market account, the latest pair of Air Jordans and Gucci belts, and the destruction of our homes, and most specifically our environment. I mean, the Amazon rainforest is being burned down. Thousands of natives are being displaced so that we can plant farms to grow food for cattle, and oil is being purposefully dumped into fresh water supplies. Frack mine wastewater is sealed in barrels and then thrown into the abandoned wells to be sealed underground that have been leaking for decades at this point. And not to mention the fact that the Fukushima reactor is still leaking. Running on 10 years for that one. The systematic stripping of our personal freedoms, the drugging of our youth to make them more teachable, which in today's terms, teachable does not mean the ability to teach somebody. Teachable means showing somebody how to take orders without question. All of these things create the illusion within the illusion, because we live in an illusory reality. We can tell this because our minds decode information the same way that a cell phone or a computer would. And on top of that, we're fed into another illusion, the illusion of, again, using the American dream is a great example here. You work, you sleep, you get married, you have 2.5 kids and a white picket fence, you retire, and then you die happy. Where's the room for experience? In the 14 days of vacation that you get every year? It doesn't seem like much of one to me. So, where does this problem stem from? Where does it originate? It originates in the ideology of separation. The idea that you and I are separate from one another, that we are in no way, shape, form, or fashion connected in really any way. This creates a spiritual bypass, which is drilled into us through our mass cultural conditioning. Cultural conditioning allowing the things that we're doing in society to be the norm and to be okay. The idea that we are cutting down the rainforest, the lungs of our planet, arguably one of the most important biological areas on our planet to be destroyed so that we can feed cattle, so that we can all eat hamburgers. It's a problem. The fact that thousands go to sleep hungry at night for no reason. And the paradox of all of this is that individual cultures that focus on the collective, that we are all one, are being destroyed so that we can create a single culture that excludes us from one another. It's very strange to think that in years past, we've had all of these cultures that have existed that have been meant to focus on the fact that we are all one, are now being excluded, cast out, and destroyed so that we can create one culture that excludes everybody. So, I'm a very visual person, and I created a chart that will kind of explain this a little bit better. So this here is the energy field that exists all around us, and this is kind of the process through which this information is disseminated. So now, with this spiritual bypass, what typically happens is this: information comes from the outside, it's picked up by the five senses, processed through the mind, through the ego, and then a judgment is created. This judgment is what we base our reality off of. And again, this judgment is based in denial, the muddied waters of perception, because we are not taking into account what could potentially be if an argument was placed. And if you notice here in the center, this is what we're missing, right? The consciousness. This is kind of the secondary form, the secondary thought process that can occur. This is what can remove the judgment. And so ideally, what you would have is this, where energy is picked up by the five senses, processed by the mind, the ego. The consciousness will then ascertain a real judgment, a real perception around it, and then it is passed back out into the energy field. So how do we do this? How do we get to this point? Because we all draw and pick up energy from this same well of life. We all process it from the same place. And this web includes the thoughts that we all carry. And I will do another video later about how we are not our thoughts, but that is another discussion for another time. And at times, it'll seem like we're sharing thoughts with one another, where somebody that you're deeply in love with, you may be able to finish each other's sentences, you may be able to pick up on what the other person is thinking without them having to say anything, and it's because you are on the same wavelength with that other person, which again is another example as to why we are not our own thoughts. But the illusion that is created within ourselves. The reality that we perceive is not an external reality. It's not something that exists outside of ourselves. It's something that is only created when it is processed by the mind. When this electrical information is picked up, perceived through the five senses, processed by the mind, a judgment is created, and that creates our perception. Our reality is based on perception. We were not cast into this environment. We create this environment through this. And when we allow the ego and the mind to rule over our consciousness, it creates a perception of a limitation that is created by ourselves. And we lose value of ourselves because of this. When we allow judgment to rule our lives, and we don't allow the possibility for new opportunities, we limit ourselves. Like what I said before, all of this energy that exists around us is neutral. There is no intrinsic positive or negative that is attached from this energy. We, in our individual perception, attach either a good or a bad label to this energy. We do. And that's even at the subconscious level. They are learned behaviors. This is not intrinsic. These learned behaviors come from our operating system or our base beliefs, the way that we perceive the world, the way that we were raised, the values that we were brought up with. The consciousness has the ability to pass a second judgment over these thoughts and these initial perceptions and judgments. Thoughts can seem to be automatic, even when we think, I hate this person, or I would really like to kill that guy. Those thoughts are not our own. That is energy that we're picked up on that has been cast through a judgment. And our consciousness has the ability to act on those or not. And the more in touch we are with our conscious selves, the easier it is to do this. And we have the ability to redraw the boundaries of our perception on all levels. One of the ways that we can begin to do this is, although I do believe that mindfulness and meditation and prayer can help, it's not practical for everybody. Not everybody is willing to sit down for 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours to just take time to do nothing. It doesn't seem appealing to some people. Not everybody is in tune or is willing to pray, and that's okay. Again, everything is okay. But one of the ways that we can practically begin to do this is to consciously pursue the highest level of our excitement. By taking the time to figure out what excites us on every level, and then pursuing that without paying a mind to what the outcome of that may be. If we allow ourselves to fall freely into this flow without judgment and without having to decide what the outcome is, that's the important part, is not deciding what the outcome should be. Because again, the mind is meant to be an observer. It's not meant to generate or create what our reality is. It's meant to observe and enjoy what is happening in our lives. And by pursuing this excitement, this highest level of excitement, we are opening ourselves up to the opportunity for potential growth and a chance to overcome our preconceived notions and create new thought patterns and opportunities within our lives. Because we have the ability to view every situation that comes to us through one lens or another. If something bad happens in our lives, we have the ability to say, this is terrible, this is awful, and reside within that victim consciousness, like, oh, why me? Why poor, pitiful me? Why is the universe doing this to me? Or to view it as an opportunity to grow and to continue to expand ourselves regardless of what's happening. The universe is going to support us whether or not, whatever we decide to do, regardless. The universe will support us. And this is evident through everything that has happened in our lives. The universe has supported me through all of my negative decision making. I've come out the other side of all of that okay and alive on this side of the dirt. All of it. The universe has supported me. So this leads to the question as to why, if I decide to start making good decisions and doing good things in my life, why would the universe suddenly decide to stop supporting me? Oh, that doesn't make any sense. Of course it's going to. Because no matter what I decide or anyone else decides to do, the universe is going to be there to support. Point blank, end of story. Now, what a lot of us get trapped in when we begin to start doing things like that is when the first hiccup occurs. When the first thing starts to go in an opposite direction of what we want, we shut off. And suddenly we stop doing that thing because a hiccup occurred. Because we think, oh, well, it just wasn't meant to be. But see, that's where the attachment of what I think needs to happen becomes an issue. Because what the universe is actually trying to do is create a new situation in which I can learn and grow. even if that's not what I think is best. And that's why we have to let go of this attachment to the need to be the only one that has a say in what can happen. Because a lot of times, things aren't going to go how we planned. And most of the time, if not every time, that is for the better. There is something better that is meant to occur from this, which is why the universe is leading us in a different direction. And by saying things have to happen my way and only my way, again, we are led back to shorting ourselves, limiting ourselves, and not allowing ourselves to fulfill the fullest potential of who we are. What is meant to be will be, and that reality may differ from what I think is best. We have to let go of the expectation of what is supposed to come from the actions that we are creating. One of the most impactful statements I have ever heard is that we are not here to create an impact. The impact has already happened simply by us being here. Our purpose is to uncover what that impact is meant to be. How far does it go? And how many will it impact? And that removes the pressure of feeling like we have to do something and we have to create a certain amount of impact, because the impact has already happened. All that we have to do is take the steps and follow the path to see what that impact leads to. And so I leave you with this question: how much are you going to impact?